Wait, what podcast is this?
You're on Opera Box Score.
Oh, never mind.
On the Dallas Opera Network, you're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's Opera Box Score. I'm your host, George Cederquist, joined on America's Talk radio show about opera by Oliver Camacho, Matt Cummings, Weston Williams, and Ashlee Hardgrave. All right, this week, it's a classic NFC East matchup. Suiting up for Philadelphia, tenor Lawrence Brownlee meets our Dallas Opera Network team to talk about singing the hardest music ever written, being an ambassador for opera to the Black community, and maybe a little fantasy football. Plus, 2-minute drill, middle-class artist throws a flag on YouTube auditions, and Jonas Kaufman wants you for Christmas. Ashlee Hardgrave, going to go straight to you for our sports talk this week.
Yes, I think besides my screen name, the other biggest thing that we need to talk about is a million congrats need to go to Kim Ng. She is Major League Baseball's first female general manager. So effective, amazing. I think immediately or in the next couple of weeks, she's going to be running the Miami Marlins. So she is the first woman to run a team, the first Asian American to run any Major League Baseball team. She is the first female general manager for any major American franchise. Also, she did get her start in Chicago in the front office of my beloved Chicago White Sox. So congratulations to her, and good job, Derek Jeter, for this hire. Good job.
Maybe the hiring of a former White Sox front office person like Ng will take the curse off them also hiring Tony La Russa. Whoops. Let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
So, Oliver, let's do some more on Gilbert and Sullivan together.
That's all right. You know, we're very lucky that Opera Philadelphia helped set this up for us. We managed to score an interview with none other than the cover boy of the current issue of Opera News magazine, the star of 2 Opera Philadelphia virtual performances, sorry, Dallas Opera Network, and somebody who just dropped a recording, Amici e Rivale, Rossini arias and duets with Michael Spires.
I didn't know Tobias was doing all of those things, Oliver.
He's a busy little bee.
We have Larry Brownlee on the show today. And because we're going to talk probably about sports, and you'll watch Matt and our eyes glaze over for a second, but I understand
but it's
that
okay. We got some deep cuts in from
that you and George are in a fantasy football league that's going to be playing against Larry Brownlee. So we had to bring our own team. You know, what do you call it when you have a pinch hitter or something like that? Like somebody who's like on the bench, you know. So we had to.
It's a pinch hitter.
Okay,
or coming off of the bench.
Sports, so we're bringing off the bench our friend Tobias Wright to join us for this interview.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here on Opera Box Score. All of you, Oliver, Toby, Matt, all of you guys. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. Thanks for all the nice things you said. Lawrence Brownlee and friends, Larry Brownlee and friends. It was meant to be something that was meant to reach out to all the people of the city. You know, when we do these, we want to try to make sure that everyone feels invited. And we want to tell people that the music of opera is not that uncool. It's very cool, and it's not that far from maybe some of the music you know. I grew up in church singing gospel, so that was my foundation. And I've done all different styles of music, and I also sing opera. And I think a lot of people have this natural reaction to opera. They think, oh, that's something else that I don't really like or I don't understand. And what we want to try to do with these Lawrence Brownlee and Friends concerts is try to show them that it's not that far of a distance from what you love, as I said before, to what opera is, and show that the same people who do some of these operatic pieces can also do some popular song, can also do some spirituals, and maybe, whatever, something that really identifies to a different person that likes a different style of music is what I want to say. So I've been happy to do that. I'm one of these artists that feel like we as musicians and artists should reach out to the community to fight for our art form, to try to be in the trenches and advocating for this. And so that's the reason why I do it with Lawrence Brownlee and Friends, and also giving voice at Houston Grand Opera is, my baby as well, and Opera Philadelphia and all these things. we've been reaching out to communities, and thankfully, a lot of the people in these various cities have been so impressed by the performances, but also have expressed interest into giving opera a try. And so that is at the root of it, the hope, that people would, really try to engage themselves in trying to come to these operatic performances. But it's been successful thus far, and I hope to do this more in the future.
And just kind of following up with that, Larry, can you talk a little bit about, it's an outreach event trying to tap into communities, but can you talk about curating the program? There's such a mixture. How do you decide what goes on there and thematically intertwining music theater, gospel, opera to tell the story and make the ask of the audience to then come back? Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Well, the first thing we do is we start with the artists themselves. What do you guys like to sing? If someone says, I don't sing anything pop music, or I don't sing any popular song or any spirituals or anything like that, then of course we're not going to include something on the program that doesn't, mesh with them. But we try to pick a diverse group of artists. It's, for the most part, it's been artists of color, and it doesn't always have to be, because I always think the diversity is more than just Black people. Diversity is a lot more than that. And so more iterations in the future will have more diversity as far as like ethnicities as well. But we take the program and we say, okay, these are the different styles we want to try to approach. What would you like to sing? Because I think it also originates from what people like to do. And so, for example, when we did it at Lyric Opera Chicago, Solomon Howard, who's an incredible operatic singer, but he also sang Stevie Wonder, and he grew up in that style, and he played the congas and the tambourine. And so he said, let's just go completely left field and do this. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that was one of the highlights of the show at Chicago. And so we try to go through the different genres and then just find what people can offer and whatever that is. And then that's how we put it together. But that's something that's diverse, something that is varied, so people can enjoy it. We want people to have that wow factor. Oh my gosh, an opera singer can also do this. And so that's been the root of what we've wanted to do. And so as we reach out into the people after the concert, and, when we were in Chicago, I'm speaking to Chicago, when we were there, so many people said, oh my gosh, this is an incredible experience. And we didn't even have to do the work as much as they told us, I'm going to come back. When is an opera that, is maybe suitable for a first time goer? And, we tell them, of course, you probably don't want to go to Parsifal in your first opera, but probably, do something like a Magic Flute or maybe a modern piece or something like that to kind of whet your appetite. And then from there, relationships have begun. So that's kind of the process we like to have when we do the concerts, and hopefully it is something that will stick, so they'll be wanting to come to the first thing they can get their hands on a ticket for.
So I feel like I have to say, Solomon Howard, he's very easy on the eye, so it also helps. Sorry, Eileen. But as you were saying about, have them bring out their other skills, whenever an opera singer does anything besides sing, it's like magic. All of a sudden, it's like, what? Exactly. You play the drums? What? You play the tambourine? It's like, what? So it's always so impressive to see people's other skills. And Solomon is also a percussionist, and he did this a cappella Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, accompanied on the tambourine, but he was using like all these different techniques on the tambourine. And I was like literally blown away, because at one point it sounded like a chain gang, and another point it sounded like a celebration. And I was like, what is happening here? It was so impressive. And
can confirm, Oliver cried.
Yeah.
That was my debut as my professional tambourine debut. I have to say that. But no, Solomon, that guy is so incredibly talented. And one of the things we've talked about doing it, and hopefully we'll do it in the future, is having a concert that's a little bit more involved, where, I see, maybe you can see in the background, I have a couple of guitars, and my instrument is really the bass guitar. And we've talked about Morris Robinson, who's like one of my best friends. him coming and singing, but also playing the drums. And then I'm singing, but playing the bass guitar, having Solomon on percussion. We have a couple pianists like Will Liverman and a couple other guys. But to do an evening that is varied, where we also come and do the instrumentation as well as the singing. So hopefully we'll come. That'll happen sooner than later, but that's on the books. That's in the plans rather, to do something like that.
And it's so great to have events like these that can really serve as a bridge between these opera houses and communities who don't always get the kind of attention that they deserve from organizations like that. And in particular, I'm thinking about the Black community and your role as an ambassador for opera into those communities. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been?
Well, so many people still have this idea, oh my gosh, I didn't know a Black person sung. Oh, I don't know that we sing, Black people sing classical music. And then I'm there to tell them that some of the greatest singers of all times have been Black singers like Leontine Price, Paul Robeson, William Warfield, Martina Arroyo, Kathleen Battle. I could go on and on and on. And they don't know these names. They're not household names. But once they realize that we have a tremendous legacy in this, and then they see us, the younger generation, out there and getting the opportunities like a Solomon, like myself, Janae Bridges and Denise Graves and Angel Blue, getting the chance to sing leading roles in the world's most important stages. They're much more eager to come and actually experience. The same thing is true when you think about golf. A lot of people didn't like it until Tiger Woods was doing it. A lot of people didn't like tennis until the Williams sisters were doing it. A lot of people don't like NASCAR, didn't until Bubba, whatever his name is, Bubba Wallace, I think his name is.
Wallace.
Yeah, Bubba Wallace. And so once they see us and that we're serious artists, that we're respected, and that, we bring our very best, I think that opens up their eyes. And so they see as a community that they want to support us. And so that's the thing we've been trying to do, is to show them that, we get the chance to be on the stage, and it would be wonderful for us to look out in the audience and to see a representation, of people that look like us as well. And so that is growing. And I can tell you from my own experience thus far for the different houses that I've worked with in Philadelphia, Houston, and Chicago to this point. And I've seen, small, but a noticeable increase in what I see the people that are performing when I'm on stage.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Matt.
Well, and so we have coming up at the end of this week on November 20th, Opera Philadelphia is going to be launching the Cycles of My Being recording. And that is compared to all of these other operas that were written by dead white guys. These are two a living Black composer and a living Black playwright on the vanguard of these issues, and written directly in response to the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor protests that broke out this year. Like, what is that like for you to be carrying that torch?
Well, it was important for me. And a few years ago, one of my friends, his name is Jason Moran. He's an incredible jazz pianist. He and I talked about the fact that it is important for us to use our art as a platform. And we talked about the fact that when we see things that are on our heart, that we must speak out. And so the Cycles of My Being started about 3 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago, where I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, crap, another person. We had already lived through Trayvon, we'd already lived through Eric Garner and Mike Brown and so many other things. And I was planning a recital to sing at Carnegie Hall. And I was like, I need something to pair with this. And it was about a year out. And so I said, wouldn't it be great to have a song cycle that spoke about the experience of Black men in America, Black men and women? And so I reached out to a couple of friends, and I just thought it was important to have a African-American or Black composer and playwright. And so for us to bring our collective experiences together to talk about what it means to be a Black man in the United States. We know that our reality is different than someone who looks like every one of you. Maybe Oliver, you have some idea of what that is, but for Matt and Toby, it's a little bit different for the experience. And so we realize that we have some difficulties. And for us to take a hold of the conversation and to talk about things like love, about faith, about family, about hope, I think, the hope is that people will be able to live a little bit in our shoes. It was a passion project for me that was important for me to kind of put out in the atmosphere. And I'm thankful that Opera Philadelphia wanted to be a part of it and to make that become a reality.
This is a really hard needle to thread, and I don't even think I've fully formed this question in my mind yet, but hopefully you'll see where I'm going with it.
It may take us a while to get there, but we'll get there.
There are prominent Black artists throughout history, and I count you among them now, who have their specialty, like Leontine with Verdi and Jesse with Strauss and Wagner and you with bel canto, but are also somehow always expected to sing spirituals and recital and whatnot. And I actually am craving that when I go hear you sing. I want to hear you sing that rep now that I know what you do with it. But do you have any resentment about the fact that there are, Black composers throughout history like William Grant Still or, Florence Price or Margaret Bonds who wrote in, a sort of traditional classical idiom, but we only want to hear their spiritual arrangements?
A lot of them perhaps didn't get the opportunity to develop those different styles. Even Charlie Parker, I did an opera called Yardbird, and they talked about the fact that he wanted to write a symphony, and he was so incredibly influenced by Stravinsky. And so when you think about our country and the problems we've had and the fact that there has been a lack of opportunities across the board, especially in developing talent and other things, you wonder what an opera like, could have been from William Grant Still or, Margaret Bonds, as you mentioned, or, Udine Smith or Willis Patterson. There's so many other people. If they had had that support and had the avenues open to them that they could develop the talent, maybe we would have some pieces in our repertoire now that were living things that would live well beyond their lifetimes because they'd had that support. But I'm thankful that these people did contribute great things in the spirituals realm. And for me, it is something that I always like to present when I do recitals, because I think it is a wonderful opportunity, but also a responsibility to carry on these traditions. Many of us who grew up in church and know these songs, it is something that was passed down through the generations by rote and by, not necessarily written down. A lot of these things that we see, like H.T. Burley and some of these other things, that's just a sketch, if you want to call it, of what the spiritual is. But to really understand how it goes, it's just something that you heard somebody singing in the house and it's been passed down. And so that is much of Americana as, the Star Spangled Banner or, Dixie or some of these other things that we think, oh, that's Americana. I think these spirituals also are a very important part of the DNA of this country as well. And so I personally like to perform them any chance I get the opportunity.
And we are fortunate to get the opportunity to hear you sing new repertoire as of yesterday with your new album that dropped, Amici Rivali, with Michael Spires, with your Rossini arias and duets that I listened to it this morning while I was baking a pie, and it is phenomenal, I have to say.
Oh man, thank you. It's this is for us, Michael and I. This is just really trying to carry on the tradition of, there's an incredible amount of American bel canto singers. Rockwell Blake, Bruce Ford, Greg Kunda, Frank Lepardo, absolutely. Frank Lepardo, Stan Olson, Paul Austin Kelly, John Ayler, some of the younger people, Richard Croft, John Osborne, Renee Barbera, Michael Spires, there are a lot of people out there, American. So we were influenced so heavily by some of these people, and it really did give us the confidence or the belief that we could be successful doing this repertoire. So Michael is like a walking encyclopedia, and he was responsible for pulling a lot of this repertoire together. And so the two of us together, we recorded it last year in Verona, and anticipating the release of it so much. And so it's something that we're very, very proud of. And thankfully, some people got their hands on it before it released, a lot of the reviewers. And I'm just happy to say that we've, thankfully, they've been giving us like across the board, like 5-star reviews, and I'm happy that people are appreciating it. And hopefully we'll get a chance to concertite this thing, because I think that you can really understand the brilliance of Rossini when you can listen to his pieces that he wrote, not necessarily us singing them, but you'll think, my gosh, he wrote that for a tenor. And I think people can, there are a lot of high notes they read through in, but I think people can tell that Michael and I had the best time doing this album.
We love talking about style, vocal style on Opera Box Score. And can you, since you have so much experience, I mean, we have sort of an idea about the difference between like Rossini, Donizetti, and Bellini. I mean, we know that Rossini's phrases are a little bit shorter, and we know that Bellini's phrases are a little bit more punishing, and we know that Donizetti has more of the orchestration that sort of is suggesting Verdi. What is it like for you, and what maybe necessarily different thing do you have to do in each of those, niche composers when it comes to the tenor rep?
Rossini, of course, everybody thinks about the fioratura, and it, that's, the flexibility, the lightness, even when you're singing things that are not necessarily light, like a Barber of Seville or like Le Contadini or Italian Girl in Algiers. But even when you're singing La Donna del Lago and Armida, you need the flexibility and the ability to move your voice and not really plant your feet and kind of like dig in like you have to do on a Bellini. If you think of Bellini, of course, Ate Okada, Puritani, and Sonnambula, it really requires some tenacity. It's punishing because the tessitura is high. It's high line, but it's kind of like engaged from a technical standpoint that it's just like, I can't take any time off. Where Rossini is like, da, 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 da. Bellini is like, da, 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 da. I mean, if you think the third act of I Puritani, son salvo al fin, son salvo, I miei nemici, it's just like, it's never ending. Yeah. It's relentless. And Donizetti, as you talked about, the orchestration being a little bit thicker in places. Everybody thinks about legato. Sometimes it's a little bit more middle voice sitting, even though from time to time you get the opportunity to go and touch up. You never have to sit up there like you do with Bellini. Bellini just sits so high. Even when you think about Sonnambula, the duet, you just hang in that punishing area all night. And so for me, the difference is the flexibility of Rossini, having to stay in this high, difficult tessitura of Bellini, the higher sitting tessitura, and then the middle voice legato where the orchestration can be a little bit thicker in Donizetti. So those would be, from my standpoint, the real differences between the three. There are some similarities. Of course, you have some fioratura in Donizetti and Bellini, but it's different in a way of Rossini. And one of the things that Michael and I are doing as a part of this promotion, we're doing this thing called the Rossini Run Challenge. They're all different. So all of you guys can take part in it as well. The Rossini Run Challenge. And so, and it'll show you how difficult Rossini is, but in a different way than Bellini and Donizetti. So I think,
let's do it. Can we set up a tournament?
Yeah.
Get a bracket going.
Yeah. So there you go.
Not that I want to make this about me, but I've always had flexibility in my voice, and I always could do the coloratura, but I can do Handel for days. But when I sing Rossini, I get so exhausted. I have all the notes in my voice to sing Ecco Ridente, but I've never made it all the way through the aria.
Oh, really?
Have you ever had one of those days? And I just want to hear what it's like from you, because we think of you as being flawless technically, but please tell us that you have struggled at the end of Ecco Ridente or something.
Oh my gosh. Of course we all struggle, but the thing is, what we have to do is try to mask our struggles. And sometimes we can't let the audience know, even if we're dying inside, we got to put on that face that's, I did everything I could to get to the end of this aria without fainting. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in the fact that you get on stage and nothing is like a machine. You have to feel like you're living in the moment, and there's flexibility. Sometimes you'll have to hold that high note a little bit shorter. Sometimes you have to take a detour. If something's not functioning correctly, you may have to take more breaths. You may have to plan out what you're going to do in a different way. So yes, we have our struggles. And I think it was Pavarotti that said that our voice and our technique is like this. No, it wasn't Pavarotti. Somebody else said this. Our voice and our technique is like this. Sometimes you lean on your voice, sometimes you lean on your technique because maybe they're not working. Then you have those few times that it happens, it lines up and everything's fine. So sometimes you'll be leaning on something, you're like, oh, that's not working, so I just need to get through it. And as an artist at a certain level, you have to make sure that it's acceptable, whatever you do, but it may not be what you are, the absolute height of what you're capable of doing. So just being smart with what you have in that moment on that evening, I think is very, very important as an artist to make sure that the audience doesn't know you're about to pass out.
Do you ever get to an ornament and decide to go for a different one in the moment? And
yes, absolutely.
And like, are all of them always planned out in advance? Like you have your Rolodex of the ones that you know that you're going to go for?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I think, you have some of them planned out, and you have a number that you can pick from. And usually I don't do it right in the second before, but maybe at the beginning of the aria, I'll say, I feel a little bit frisky today, so let me try something that I was working on. So instead of you go or something like that, a little variation, but you usually have practiced it before. You don't want to like be working on a moment to see if something might work. So anything it's like the more you know, the more you can show. So if you've had these things in your mind, or it may be something that you've done in another aria that can fit in that moment there, and so you're like, okay, I've never done it in Eco di Dente, but I did it on Guerra per una Bella. Does it work? I think it does work, and then you can like do something to infuse and make that performance a little bit more special.
Can you talk just a little bit? We've got a lot of singers who listen to this show about working with, and this is what an opportunity to get to ask you this, working with different conductors and how you get to kind of navigate who makes the decisions on what, when you're singing really difficult passages, and how much do you personally find that you have to readjust certain things based on who you're working with?
Well, at a certain level, people, they want to see you do their best. Do your best because they want to do their best. And it's best not to have any type of conflict. So a lot of them will ask you, what do you do here? Do you need any more time for something? Or how does it work for you? Or maybe they will suggest something. And of course, at a certain level, I respect those people so much that I feel like they're going to give me good information. Or they may say, what do you think about this? After they've heard me sing something. Or if they want me to do something, then I'll say to them, what do you think about this? Because this might actually work. And so there's usually collaboration, and people are very, very open. I mean, I've done that with people like Benini and some of the other great bel canto singers. But I think it comes from also the place that I understand the style of Rossini, Donizetti, and Bellini. And I know that something that sounds Rossinian doesn't work in Bellini per se. And if I can understand the style, usually we can agree on what should happen. But I always try to go to rehearsals very, very flexible to make sure that if they're trying to bring something out different, that is something that I could benefit on and make what I do better or enhance what I'm already offering. So it's one of the things I always try to make sure I do is to try to stay open and available, that they can give me whatever could be helpful for me as a singer.
So we're going to nerd out just a little bit more. We are all mostly familiar with a voice like Pavarotti and Corelli and Di Stefano. And when we listen to them for a long time, we can begin to understand their techniques. Like Pavarotti always begins to modify, at around E natural or something like that, sometimes before, I've yet to figure out what your tells are. And I would be curious to wonder, like, what did you smooth out so that you have no tells, and what can we look forward to when you start getting older?
Well, my teachers have told me that always I have to bring the head voice down and to make the voice unify from top to bottom. And so, we know that tenors start to modify, do all kinds of stuff around E flat, E, F sharp, or something like that. So, when I've done exercises, my teacher talks about going slim through the passaggio, so there's no break in the register, so that it sounds like one voice. And so I don't know. I think I've worked to try to smooth that over. Sometimes I have to say, let's see. oh, that didn't work like it should. And then I need to revert back to some of the things that my teacher told me. So what are my tells? I don't know. It's this idea that, I mean, I've always had a high voice, but bringing this head voice down and really trying to have enough headiness in my sound that hopefully that that it never feels like it's just a completely different voice when I go from the bottom to the top. Does that make sense what I'm saying? It's all about bringing the head voice down and smoothing over that area between the E flat. And where do I start to cover? It happens automatically. I'm not necessarily thinking about it per se, but I think it starts happening E flat, E, D, or something like that I begin to cover it. I actually was doing a masterclass earlier today, and I was working with the sophomore, young tenor, and I was just like, I don't know if you heard the idea of cover yet, but cover starts to happen because if you can't sing that F wide open like that. That's not going to work. You got to make sure you start to modify before. And that's not necessarily the note that you have to sing there, but you may have to modify it earlier so you won't hear the break. And so that's the thing you have to understand with your voice, how it functions and where you have those breaks. And so you can figure that area out.
So I'm sorry, I'm sort of hoarding this question, but we talked about before we started recording this song you sang at Larry Brownlee and Friends that you dedicate to your son. What is the name of it again?
All Night, All Day.
Okay, so I hope you get to sing that in the next version of Larry Brownlee and Friends because it's killer. But I will say you do something different in that, and I don't know if you could describe it, but I know that I hear a different approach to your upper register. You're a little bit more open in that type of singing.
Yeah, and it's, there's this idea of voix mixte, mixed voice that I try to do. And I do a lot of heady hooting, if you want to call it that, heady hooting, that's all that other stuff that extends. Now, is that absolute falsetto? Not necessarily. I think there's a difference. In my opinion, there's a difference between falsetto and head voice or voix mixte, because I think there's a lot more body in the sound of voix mixte rather than so that when you go you can make the transitions from going to that heady hootiness again down into your voice without a break. And so, yes, I like to use that because if you're thinking of angels and in that realm and stuff like that, I think it's appropriate for that song. So it is one of the things that I try to employ because the way it was written, the composer, Damian Sneed, a very good friend of mine, he wrote it very high. It's high. The whole thing. I think the highest note is a E flat. And so that's one of those pieces where you have to wear your shoes one size too small in order to sing it.
That's the swan roasting.
You're like, wow, that is really high,
That's like middle voice for you though.
No, it's not. I'm like, what were you like taking helium in or that day or something like that? It's so high. But yeah, I do use that. And that is another element of my singing that I want to try to do that I don't necessarily get to use in bel canto because of course you're always engaged singing in the full core of your voice. But for example, in Barbara Sevilla's that's headier. That's headier in the sound. But I can sing in I mean, it's the same, the same notes, but a different approach. And this is the thing. These are the things I think we need to explore as singers to increase the
palette.
The palette.
Yeah.
All the things we get a chance to choose from when we infuse our pieces. Jonas Kaufman, I know he's a big conversation, these days. But Jonas Kaufman.
Are we going to talk about it?
The thing I respect about Jonas, he has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. You want to call that. Or he has a lot of elements or colors that he infuses his singing with. So I respect that. And so for me as an artist, I want to become more intelligent and be able to, infuse what I'm doing by these various colors that I think we have at our disposal. And as I do a lot of art song recitals as well. And I think this is the place where you get a chance to explore these various things. And so the more I can do it in different pieces, I want to do it.
Well, Larry Brownlee, thank you so much. Congratulations on the new record. And we look forward to watching all your stuff. You're in so many places all the time. I don't know how you keep up with everything you're doing, but
I don't either.
The sit down with Larry Brownlee and Cycle of My Being and the Larry Brownlee and Friends coming up with Opera Philadelphia. So much stuff. Yeah, we're watching, and thank you for being on our show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Go Steelers.
Opera Philadelphia introduces the Opera Philadelphia Channel, a season of innovative, dynamic opera reimagined for the screen.
The channel features soprano Lisette Oropesa in her acclaimed role debut as Violetta in La Traviata,
Internationally renowned tenor Lawrence Brownlee in 2 recitals, including the searing Cycles of My Being, a reflection on being a black man in America,
a new film of David T. Little's Soldier Songs, plus so much more.
The Opera Philadelphia Channel, available on TVs, computers, and mobile devices. Buy a season pass for just $99 or rent individual productions at operaphila.tv.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
In an eye-opening investigative report, Middle Class Artist examines the new trend of virtual auditions for emerging artists. Equipped with YouTube analytics data from 15 artist interviews and input from leading opera companies, Zach Finkelstein joins us to crunch the numbers.
The American Guild of Musical Artists, or AGMA, has begun a membership-wide vote to amend its constitution. Members will vote in a referendum for either a complete revision of the Constitution, a set of amendments to the existing Constitution called the Petition Amendments, or neither. Members will also vote on amending dues caps, as well as a reduction of the initiation fee.
A 65-foot tall Marc Chagall-designed curtain that once hung in front of the Met stage is up for auction. It's such a quintessentially Chagall image, with multiple figures and a swirling fantasy flying through the air, said Bonham's Auction House Senior Vice President Molly Ott-Ambler. The curtain is expected to be sold for between $250,000 and $500,000.
An excerpt of Jonas Kaufmann singing the Mariah Carey mega hit, All I Want for Christmas Is You, became instantly memeable last week and drew ire from the opera community. But is Kaufman laughing all the way to the bank as his newest album, It's Christmas, rises to the top of the classical charts?
Brooklyn Academy of Music has announced that the organization's president, Katie Clark, will leave in January 2021 to accept another opportunity. Clark, the violinist turned arts executive, joined BAM in 2015 and led an expansion of the institution's campus and the presentation of new artistic programming.
It's bad news in Norway as the Norwegian National Opera and Ballet cancels all November performances after an employee of the company tested positive for COVID. That action beat the city of Oslo's decision to lock down by only a few days.
And bad news in Stockholm. It is with a heavy heart that we have to announce that we are canceling all public activities until December 31st. This is, of course, a sad and heavy message. Even though the practice of stage art is important, it must not perish human health, said Royal Swedish Opera CEO Birgitta Svenden in a statement.
Opera Orlando has announced that it will return to live performances with a Die Fledermaus-themed showcase. Said executive director and singer Gabriel Preiser, in addition to getting input from fellow opera and theater companies who have started to reopen, we are incorporating CDC recommendations, local official guidance, and input from our company partner Orlando Health in preparing to launch our 2020-21 season. The Flying Bat Showcase will be presented in December.
The San Francisco Opera moved its costume sale online last week in order to fundraise for its employees. 500 costumes were snatched up on Friday alone, with prices ranging from the double digits to around $1,000. Quote, I think you can actually wear most of the stuff we have, anywhere from parties to costume balls, said costume shop manager Jay Althusser. You can dress up your children as peasants. Ah, yes, every parent's dream, right, George?
Yeah, Ashlee, I did that years ago. On the disabled list, the Teatro Real de Madrid is set to make adjustments to its production of Rusalka. According to the theater's announcement, tenor Eric Cutler has broken his Achilles tendon during rehearsal, but will go on for his scheduled performances as the Prince on crutches.
Exit stage right, the bass baritone Thomas Hammonds, who sang more than 250 times at the Met Opera, died suddenly at the age of 68. He created the role of Henry Kissinger in the world premiere of Nixon in China in 1987 at Houston Grand Opera.
And tenor Samuel Hall died at age 47 from injuries sustained in a motorcycle accident in his hometown of Columbus, Ohio. Hall had returned to his singing after a long career working in technology and began an extensive career at regional opera companies including St. Petersburg Opera, Opera Tampa, and Opera Columbus.
And on this day, November 16th, in 1850, it was the first performance of Verdi's opera Stiffelio at the Teatro Grande in Trieste. In 1895, composer and conductor Paul Hindemith was born in Hanau, Germany. In 1896, Lawrence Tibbett, the American baritone, was born in Bakersfield, California. In 1908, Arturo Toscanini made his conducting debut in Aida at the Metropolitan Opera. In 1940, or maybe 1941, it was the birth of Bulgarian soprano Gena Dimitrova. And in 1954, Scottish conductor Donald Runnicles was born.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
This is an important number to crunch.
Yes. It's such a delicate opening.
I don't want a
Oliver.
lot for Christmas.
That's not what I was
Just one
expecting.
thing I need.
Oh
I
no.
don't care about
What do you need,
presents
Jonas?
underneath
Ah!
the Christmas tree.
Stop
Beautiful.
talking!
I want you for my own. More
The Rex Harrison approach.
than ever know.
Is he talking to
My
me?
wish come true. All I want for Christmas
Oh, here it comes.
There's supposed to be a riff there.
That crescendo was off the charts.
I don't want it.
I
I don't want it.
How can we unhear that? Is that such a thing possible?
A proper German lads version of Mariah Carey.
Don't
It's
hate,
just
but guys.
so bizarre. Oliver, can you unshare your screen? It's just upsetting me.
I unironically enjoy this album. You guys are all wrong.
I am all about some cross-genre turning things on its ear. I've built a freaking career out of it, okay? Like, I am definitely one who's usually in full support of this. There's just something about this. It's not quite to the camp level of the Vienna Last Christmas. It's like, it's close, but it's not
Hall
there.
of Fame.
And so
Hall
I'm
of
just
Fame.
mad and
Christmas.
sad, and I want to go lay down. Like, that's all I want.
Well, luckily we have our special guest to give us a definitive ruling on the Jonas Kaufmann Christmas album, Hot or Not.
The most important news of the week.
Zach, what's your hot take?
I think it's the hottest summer jam of 2020.
Yeah. There we go.
So, Zach Finkelstein, you have been so busy doing so many things, and then all of a sudden you drop these bombs that make everybody wonder, how come nobody's been collecting this data? How come it takes you to put the work in so that we can really have the data to show what we all have been thinking? Thank you so much for this recent article in Middle Class Artists. And the title, for those who haven't seen it yet, published a week ago today: Emerging Opera Singers Now Pay for Online Auditions. Point. Are companies watching them? Zach, what can you tell us about which American companies are actually watching auditions?
I can tell you a lot of things. So, I've been looking at young artist issues for a while now, and, the hot story this fall everyone's been talking about is this audition consortium. And it's a group, it sounds Dr. Evil-esque, but it's actually such a great idea. It's 12 companies led by Houston Grand Opera. And the idea is to sort of streamline the application process where, it all is on in the same date. There's a similar application. It's not quite at the level of a common application like a college, essay. But there are, economies of scale where everything's a little bit easier in theory. And so that was the pitch that I think these companies were making to singers is, it's going to be easier. It's going to be more equitable, less of a headache. We're all trying to get through this. And I know there were also, major steps forward on application fees. I think some of them charge nothing and some of them charge as little as $5. So, on paper, this all sounded great. And then reports started coming in from young artists saying, very tech savvy young artists, that, hey, these are hosted on YouTube's and I have YouTube analytics. Let's take a look under the hood. And because, embedded views in third-party sites on YouTube are counted as views, they were able to see that, sites coming from insert name of application site were averaging a certain amount of time. And that was not the full time of an ARIA. And in fact, some people showed that, their second or third ARIA didn't really have any views. So I interviewed a lot of people. I think the final tally was closer to 20, but I think conservatively I said 15. And, the main finding was that there weren't 12 views for 12 applications. Let's just put it that way. And, if there were a lot of views, they were generally, sort of flitting around like 30 seconds here, 45 seconds there. One person who applied to 14 young artist programs, one of her views got one of her ARIAs got 8-second view from the application site. So, some pretty shocking statistics on what we had all sort of thought in our heart of hearts, but had prayed was not true. And the data, it's not 100% definitive. It's, it's only 15 people, but it is pretty devastating to look at, based on the amount of money that singers are putting into these auditions. I mean, my first case study, Rebecca, she put $5,000, including lessons and coachings, into 14 auditions, and 14 applications to audition. Let's just be clear for those who don't follow.
Right.
Yeah, she didn't get a single audition. So, and I think she got 5 views on her first video, 1 minute and 10 seconds. And these are ARIAs. They're not like, 2-minute bops on the radio. These are like 4 or 5 minute ARIAs. And it's pretty clear that they're sort of skipping around to different sections and checking for, runs and high notes and cadenzas or whatever, and then moving on as fast as possible because, to their credit, these companies are receiving record numbers of applications. I think it said in the article, Pittsburgh had almost a 50% increase in applications this year. So just a wild amount of people applying. And the fact that it's, the wild, wild west on technology in these, I mean, they're not setting ground rules is part of the problem. So what it instead of providing an equitable, level playing field across, all economic and, socioeconomic backgrounds, it basically, some people are spending $2,000 on a microphone setup, and some people are using these little apps with digital these little like digital pianos and recording on a 6th generation iPhone or an Android. And I mean, don't tell me that you don't take this into consideration. Like, there's a reason every person on YouTube has a ring light. There's a reason that every singer bought a microphone. It's because aesthetics matter and the voice matters. Like, high frequency voices are much harder to capture in certain situations. I know that it's a big problem for sopranos, even on certain microphones. Yeah. So, there are inequities built into this process that were not removed. In fact, they were expanded upon. It just goes to show that this is just sort of a fresh coat of paint on the same systemic inequity that all emerging artists are facing right now.
Well, obviously, this is a pretty big problem, but I'm kind of at a loss for solutions. Do you have any ideas as to what?
I have actually. I was going to propose, and I don't know what you think about this, Zach, and maybe you could be the person to amplify my solution and give me credit. Maybe we need to go. I mean, let's just be more realistic about how these auditors are using these materials. Maybe each singer can do short videos of passage work, of high notes, of important phrases of things, like their highlights reel, and send that. And then if the auditor wants to hear that person in audition, then that's when they request a full thing, like a full aria or an in-person audition.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, the Oregon Bach Festival, I applied a few years ago, and they just wanted 32 bars of Cum Sancto Spiritum from the Mass in B minor at lightning pace, and a couple of scales, and recite some German. And that gave them what they wanted, because they were looking for people who can wiggle, who have pretty voices, who have good range, and who can sing in German well. I mean, so I think it's companies. I'm very sympathetic to what companies are going through right now, because they weren't expecting this many applications. They're overloaded. In some cases, half or most of their staff are furloughed or being unpaid or working wild hours right now just to get this done. So I totally understand that, but in a way it's their own fault, because they created this. Like the young artist didn't emerge from, the cave with man and fire and young artist programs. This is a very recent invention by companies. And the application process through this application site is a very recent phenomenon, and requiring this much, requiring you to fill out, give you a CV and fill out the exact same information on an application and send in 3 arias in different languages and have different arias for a second round. I mean, if you know what you want, just say it. Like, that's what singers want. They want transparency in the audition process. And, that also goes to who is coming back. So companies are not being clear of who is being rehired.
Yeah.
And that's especially problematic in 2020 because the 2019 Young Artist programs were largely canceled. And those people many of them were given invitations to return. So if you have 800 people applying to your Young Artist program and half of those people are sopranos, okay, that's not an exaggeration. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
And you lose even 1 of 4 soprano spots to returning students. That is a devastating change in probability.
Right.
That has to be made clear. It just has to be. You have to be more transparent. So exactly, streamline the application, give it what you want. And I go through a whole list of ways to fix the process at the end of the essay. But it is, I think, the most important problem in opera is fixing what's happening at the bottom. Because you can't get diversity, equity, inclusion on stage, in administrators' offices, on the boards, if you don't have it in the practice rooms at conservatories, if you don't have it in the young artist programs, and if you just let anyone buy $1,000 mic and send an application, you're not doing it right. I'm sorry, you're just not. There needs to be accountability and transparency in this process. And, despite the best of intentions, that did not happen.
AGMA is the American Guild of Musical Artists. It is the musicians union that most people in the opera world must be a part of to be employed at the highest echelons of this art form, and even the not so high echelons of this art form. So one of the things that has been a big stumbling block at the moment is that, we spend all this time working and going to school and honing this craft and going through lessons and coachings and learning foreign languages, and you get your first big job. Great. Now you have to join the musicians union to legally be employed by this house. To do this, you're going to have to pay some dues, some initiation fees. And if you're coming in cold and this is the first time you're ever going to be a member of this union, you're going to have to pay a hefty set of fees that are going to be upwards of around $1,000. So when I got one of my first big jobs, when I clearly did not have $1,000 on hand, I had to have that money in hand to give to this union. Otherwise, I would lose this gig. So the reason that we will often talk about this union and all of the things that go on with this union is that they govern most of how all of these folks in this industry that we love are employed. And to even get in the door, there's a heavy chunk of change that you got to have on hand.
I think it comes down to 3 things. The first is self-advocacy. So what I like about the members petition is it guarantees each member classification a spot in the leadership. And so right now, without getting in too far into the weeds, there are choristers, there are soloists, there are dancers, there are directors. So the members petition allows, has no board appointed members of executive leadership, and all of them are member elected, and all 7 categories are represented in the executive leadership. So that's a big change. The second important thing is access to information. So I know a major concern with artists with AGMA is, between the articles that have been coming out at NPR and New York Times, is the idea of secrecy. I'm not going to comment on that, but there is a sense that in the press and among some members that AGMA has a secrecy issue.
Yeah, like why are my dues buying a building in Manhattan at the height of a pandemic is a question I've heard from other members.
That is a question I've also heard.
Yep.
And I will leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so, access to information is so critical. The data that I'm publishing on middle class artists is allowing artists to be heard. It's allowing artists to make decisions based on good information that's being, if not hidden from them, basically not advertised. So part of it is there's all this great data, but it's not advertised. So, if people want to learn more about what's happening in their leadership of AGMA, the member proposed petition, it opens board minutes up to AGMA member scrutiny, and it removes restrictions on AGMA members viewing board meetings on Zoom. The idea being it's member driven up and not from the top down. And then my last point I would probably make is based on economic fairness. So who benefits and who doesn't. And I'm sorry to put it so bluntly, but charging $1,000 for someone to join AGMA is not equitable. It just isn't.
Zach Finkelstein, middleclassartist.com. So in-depth, so truthful, and so insightful. Thank you so much, buddy, for hanging out with us.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Let's wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call. On Opera Box Score.
All right. Such a pleasure, as always, having Zach Finkelstein on the show. Middleclassartist.com.
True American hero, Zach Finkelstein.
That is some white excellence for you there.
Everybody's sweetheart.
Good call, bad call. Oliver Camacho, what do you got?
So this literally debuted just a few days ago, I think on Saturday or Friday. It's Annie Lennox performing
Queen.
Dido's Lament, Purcell, Dido and Aeneas, When I Am Laid in Earth. It is so good. Get ye to the internet, to the YouTubes, and watch this. This is crossover done on the level of Klaus Nomi. Like, just so brilliant, so artistic, and will introduce people to this aria, which is just one of the best pieces of music of all time, but here for a new audience. And I'm just very happy that this thing exists.
Matt Cummings.
If you're looking for something to watch this week while restrictions start to creep up, Madrid is rebroadcasting their novel socially distant production of La Traviata from earlier in this pandemic on operavision.eu with an all-star cast of Marina Rebecca, Michael Fabiano, and Artur Rachinsky. Like, that's a really good cast.
Weston Williams, pretty as always. Ashlee Hardgrave.
My good call this week has nothing to do with opera, but everything to do with soul restoring. It's Henry James Garrett, who is a cartoonist in the UK. He has put out a book called This Book Will Make You Kinder, and it is about how his career went from silly cartooning to drawing cartoons with empathy to what does empathy look like to we should all be kinder, how am I kind, how can I teach the world to be kinder without trying to pose as a moral authority? And it will, in fact, make you kinder. Can't you tell?
I saw the title. I thought it was This Book Will Make You Kinder. I thought it was about German
Different kind of book.
Current.
Different kind of book, George.
That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Our announcer's Norm Woodel at normwoodel.com, NORMWOODEL.com. Our theme song is Vodka Inferno, written and performed by the Diablo Swing Orchestra. On Facebook, search for Opera Box Score. Be sure to share and comment on our posts. On Twitter and Instagram, we're at Opera Box Score. Podcast version of our show is available on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. The views and opinions expressed on Opera Box Score are solely those of the show's creative team. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of the accounts of this show without the express written consent of Opera Box Score would be totally cool. Our creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. Our audio and video editor is Weston Williams. For our guest, Lawrence Brownlee, and that cad, Tobias Wright, along with your co-hosts, Matt Cummings and Ashlee Hardgrave, I'm George Cederquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera while you watch your fantasy football team get crushed. We're back with an all-new show next week when we give thanks for all things opera. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more bare trees. Join us!